Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Social, presented by Crescent Literary Society. Joining us today is the Environment Minister of Ashoka University, Ms. Anjali Dalmia. She is the co-founder of the Yugma Network, a network of student unions, clubs, and committees and youth working on environmental issues. She also coordinated the youth movement against EIA 2020. She's also known for her work in Project Amara, where they work on breaking taboos related to menstruation and raising awareness on sustainable menstruation. She has been working in the field of sustainable menstrual awareness for the past 5 years now. And without further ado, let's meet our guest. Good morning, ma'am, and welcome to the show. Today's topic is all about the environment, as we look forward to hearing from you on these pressing issues that is prevalent in this day and age, especially these past few months in India, if I may say so. So now, jumping right into the first question that I want to ask you is, what is environmental impact assessment? What role does it play regarding the nation's ecosystem, and how effective has it been in regulating the environment? As in, what is EIA?
Right, sure. So firstly, thank you for having me. It's really nice to be here and nice to talk to all of you today. So the environment impact assessment, let's quickly decode what exactly is the environment impact assessment. So any country has laws around the environment and laws to regulate where development is happening, how much development is happening, how it's affecting the local people, it's affecting the flora and fauna, the ecosystem of that area. And India also has these Environment Protection Acts. So it has the Environment Protection Act, which that's the name of the act. This is an act in the law which regulates it regulates a lot of laws around how industries can establish itself, for example, wildlife and many things come under the Environment Protection Act. And one of them is the Environment Impact Assessment. So this is not a law. The Environment Impact Assessment is a notification. So what that means is it's like a way to assess what the damage might be if a particular industry or project is set up in a particular area. So it's only a tool. You can think of it like a tool to ensure that proper survey is done before any industry is set up. So you have to go and survey what the impact on the people would be, the ecology would be, even the infrastructure in the area, so the roads, the lamps, everything is surveyed under this environment impact assessment. And the first one was in 1994. The first time this was actually put out. And since the first one, 1994, it was actually decently written down. It ensured that I would not say it was still great. There was still a lot of problematic clauses in it. I think a lot of our environment laws are very flawed. They don't address the nuances of the environment, the ecosystem at all. But even then, compared to what we have today, it was slightly better. 2006, the EIA was again revised and a new draft was put out. So the Environment Impact Assessment is one of the very few notifications or drafts which actually has public consultation in India. So what that means is that anytime a project is proposed and an EIA is done, a part of the EIA means that you have to go and talk to the public that would be directly affected by it. You have to hold a consultation period with the public when they're allowed to send in what their objections are, their concerns are, their suggestions are, their feedback is. And this is a very important part because if an industry is being set up in a particular area, the people who it's going to affect have the right to share their opinions on how it's going to affect them and the ecosystem there. So the 2006 EIA, when it was actually proposed, there was a lot of protest around it. Back then, the internet wasn't as big yet, so we didn't have Instagram, we didn't have social media as much, so it didn't blow up into a very large-scale protest, but there were a lot of physical strikes that had happened. There was a lot of protest around it, and there have been many reports showing like how much the EIA 2006 was actually diluted from the 1994 one itself. So it allowed a lot of industries to set up in places where they should not have been. A lot of coal mines have been established since then. So today, everything that's happening is a result of the 2006 actually, not because of the current EIA draft, which we'll later talk about. So there's been a lot of coal auctions which have been happening. There's been a lot of illegal setting up of industries, pharmaceutical industries, oil extraction industries, chemical producing industries, And they've been happening in places where it's really polluting the ecosystem. And even dams have become a huge issue in India because every single river is being dammed for hydroelectricity because it's considered clean energy. And under the EIA, it's given more leeway. So this is what the environment impact assessment is. Would you like me to talk about the 2020 right now?
Yes, that will be the follow-up question by my co-host right now.
Yeah. So, what do you think? What are the changes that have been brought about in the EIA 2020 draft, and what are its impacts, especially in Tamil Nadu?
Yeah. So the EIA 2020, there's a reason that there's such huge scale talk about the EIA 2020, and the main reason is that. So in the pandemic, obviously our economy has suffered, and what I personally believe is that the EIA 2020 was put out just before the pandemic for a few reasons. One is that I think they assumed that it would be harder for people to mobilize and protest against the EIA 2020 if we're all sitting in lockdown, which clearly was not the case. It gave us more time to mobilize, actually, even though we weren't able to do it physically on the streets. And the other thing is that I think it was meant to maybe be as a way to help boost up the economy again by allowing heavy industries to set up anywhere with the fewest clearances possible, basically. So under the EIA 2020, there's many areas that get diluted. I'll cover the main few. Firstly, public consultation. Like I said, EIA is one of the very few which actually has public consultation. So under the EIA 2020, a lot of industries are actually exempted from public consultation. So these include things like offshore and onshore oil drilling, chemical industries, construction, railways, highways expansion, anything that's considered strategic by the central government, anything to do with defense. Strategic also, I think, it's very hard to exactly pinpoint what it could be. I think it's anything that they either don't want the public to know or it's very highly into defense. I would say it's probably one of the two. These are just a few of the very big industries which are allowed to now operate. Dams as well. Dams also. These are just a few of the very big industries which are now allowed to operate without any public clearance whatsoever. So that means once they propose the project, they can just go ahead and start it once they get their environmental clearance. They don't need to hold any public consultation period with the public. It's a big issue because the local people need to have a say in especially projects like dams and those kind of things which are going to destroy the entire ecosystem of the area. So that is one very big issue. Secondly, again, regarding public consultation. So earlier, public consultation period time was given 45 days with the actual time when the public could submit their suggestions or any comments was 30 days. So this already is a very short amount of time in a country like India where everyone speaks a different language. Internet connection is not widely available. It takes a lot of time to get to the most inner parts of India, to get to the local people who will actually be affected by these projects. And a lot of the work is done by NGOs, not by government organizations anyway. So that was already a small enough period. They've also reduced that. So now the overall time is 40 days and they've reduced that 30-day period to 20 days. So they want that information about a project reaches the people and they get their suggestions and comments within 20 days. That's highly unrealistic. It's been months and the ministry has still not put out the EIA 2020 draft in all the regional languages of India. And they want that an EIA filed by a company can be translated and given to the locals within 20 days. It's very unlikely. So that's another issue with public consultation. Apart from that, there's a very problematic clause in the EIA 2020 that's been carried over from the EIA 2006, which is called the post facto grant or post facto approval. So what this basically means is that a company can come, it can clear out the land, it can level the land, and then can get its environmental clearance or file for an EIA afterwards. And it can just be waived off by a fine. So obviously that's a really big issue because the damage is already done. And the damage is done without permission. So that's a huge issue there that has been criticized by many. Even the Supreme Court has actually put it down as unconstitutional. So it's a pretty, that part is a pretty big issue as well. Apart from this, there is also the issue that the projects have been categorized as A, B1, B2 industries. And basically the categorization is about the size and the capacity of the industry. And then they've allocated rights to these different categories of industries accordingly. So environmental rights, basically, of what they cannot and can do. This is also this is a huge issue because the environmental impact of an industry does not depend on the size and the capacity of the industry itself, right? It can pollute. It could be a highly polluting industry, but the size and capacity be very small. So that again is a very big issue in the EIA 2020 draft. And just to connect it to Tamil Nadu, and I think you might be aware of like one of the biggest issues right now is the Sun Pharmaceuticals, the Vedantangal bird sanctuary issue that's happening right now in Tamil Nadu. And so they actually set up claiming that they were a zero liquid discharge plant. But that's not true because the villagers firstly have been complaining for a long time that there's a lot of toxins and pollutions which have been released into the water. And there was also a survey which was done by the Chennai Climate Action Group and the Community Environmental Monitoring. And both of them said that there's actually toxins in the water. And it was actually, they recently found that there was actually carcinogens in the water. Yeah, it was pretty bad. So there were so the Sun Pharmaceuticals is actually a red, it's a red category industry, which means it's a highly polluting industry. It's been operating illegally inside the bird sanctuary. And the thing is that even though the bird sanctuary is protected under the Wildlife Protection Act of India, it's clearly not making much of a difference because the industry is operating inside the water. So they found 4 different carcinogens in the water. And the studies have shown that basically they're essentially poisons for the birds, and they can cause a lot of diseases, and there's a lot of issues with the aquatic ecology of that area as well. So the entire ecosystem of that bird sanctuary could very well be destroyed soon if the industry is not taken out of the bird sanctuary. So, and of course, it also affects the people living around that area, right? It's not this little bubble, right? The bird sanctuary isn't a little bubble. There's people who live inside the bird sanctuary. It's people who live around the bird sanctuary who also use the same water for their daily activities. And the fact that a pharmaceutical company was able to illegally set up inside this is just a huge flaw in our environment laws in India. And the EIS is going to make it easier for more industries like this to set up without any clearances whatsoever. So that's definitely one of the big issues of the EIA. I understand why they're doing it. I don't want to say that I sympathize with it, but I get why they're doing it. But I really don't think it tackles the very issue of something like the pandemic, something like the fact that a pandemic was able to cause our entire economy to crash to this extent. The tie between the local people and the reliance on natural resources is a lot higher.